Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Today I am thrilled and excited because we have a wonderful guest. It's a big honor to me. I'm happy to welcome Stephen Kaufman. I'm sure you know this amazing man, and welcome.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to our discussion. Very happy to be here.
For people, I'm sure everybody knows, but just in case somebody didn't know, you are a polyglot. As I learned a long time ago, you speak more than, but maybe not speak, but you are familiar with about 20 languages at different levels,
Right.
right?
Yeah. I mean, just a brief sort of introduction. For most of my career, I was in the lumber business. I started out as a Canadian diplomat, which is why I learned Japanese, well, Chinese initially and then Japanese. In my lumber business, I needed, other languages, and so I worked on my Swedish and German and so forth and so on. So I was vaguely interested in languages. A big event in my sort of language learning career was when at the age of 60, I decided to tackle Russian. And that has had a big sort of impact on me and my language learning. And about that time, my son and I started this language learning platform called Link, which is where I learn languages. And I've just had a lot of fun with languages, and now I'm learning Arabic and Persian, and that would be number 19 and 20.
Wow. Yeah, this is truly inspirational because a lot of people can't even handle Russian to a certain point. So
Nor can I, by the way.
Speaking, nor can I. Even Russian language teachers make mistakes all the time. So
Right.
it's a journey, lifelong journey learning languages. So about Russian, based on your experience,
Right.
compared to other languages, in terms of learning experience, how difficult it is to learn Russian?
Okay, to me, every language has its difficulties and things that make it easy to learn. So, in the case of Russian, obviously the difficulty is sort of the intricacies of Slavic grammar, not unique to Russian, but common to Polish and Ukrainian and Czech and so forth and so on. The case system and the verb system. On the other hand, a big advantage with Russian is the wealth of material that's available. There are some languages where you can't find stuff, whether it be radio, TV programs, audiobooks, things of that nature. For Russian, the quantity of high quality audiobooks, first of all, excellent narrators. And then, radio material I was able to use. I know it's a bit controversial in Russia, but Echo Moskvy has every day uploads 10, 15 interviews with transcripts. So it's a limitless source of, you don't have to agree with what the commentators are saying, but as a source of language, it's phenomenal. And there are probably others. So Russian is, and not to mention, of course, 19th century literature. In other words, outside copyright-free material of very high quality that I can import into Link. So it's one of the languages with the greatest amount of compelling content. So to me, that makes up for the difficulty of the language.
Yeah, but all the things you mentioned, they are quite advanced for most people. For you, they are perfect now, like Echo Moskvy
Right.
and classic literature. Do you remember how you started those first steps?
Right. So I started before we had Russian at Link. So and my approach is always like the beginner material. The beginner stage is the first 3 to 6 months when you have very little sense of the language and you need a lot of repetition. And typically what I used to do and what I still recommend is to get 2 or 3 different beginner books that cover more or less the same material, but they're different books. So you get a little bit of variety, but you're essentially focusing in on the same beginner material. And the early stages, any language, I find actually quite encouraging, because in a short period of time, you go from knowing nothing to actually being able to say a few things and understanding a few things. Now, in languages that I've learned since then, I use our mini stories at Link because there's so much repetition, and in particular repetition of verbs. And I've always felt that verbs are key to being able to express yourself. But once I have a certain sort of level, after 3 or 6 months, depending on the language, then I force myself to get into more challenging material. Recognizing that in that early stage, you meet the same words over and over again. So it's easier to learn the words because these are the high frequency words. As you progress in the language, frequency sort of declines very, very quickly. And so you end up having to do a lot of listening and reading. And that's why I try to move into things that are interesting, even though they're difficult, as early as I can. But the first period, and in these starter books, they'll have some grammar explanations that you'll read and forget. And gradually, if you repeat enough, you'll start to get sort of a toehold in the language. And that's what I did with Russian. But very soon thereafter, I moved into authentic material.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great suggestion to use several sources, because I know a lot of people just focus on one book, and even if they don't like it, they try to follow it anyway, and at the end of the day, they get disappointed and just quit entirely. Same with following just one teacher. For example, like following somebody on YouTube and just watching their stuff. There are so many resources today that it's better to get into.
I often quote Manfred Spitzer, who is a German neuroscientist who studied the brain and how we learn, and he makes this point, which I think is so important. The brain requires repetition, but also requires novelty. You can't just feed the brain the same stuff over and over again. The efficiency declines quite quickly. So you have to, but you do need repetition to learn, neurons that fire together, whatever that. There's a famous saying by actually a Canadian neuroscientist who said that the neurons have to fire together. So you need that repetition, but you also need novelty. So however you do it, you have to provide the brain with new things, interesting things, novelty. So that can be different books covering the same material, it can be different teachers, different content, different learning activities, but you do need the variety.
Yeah, I agree with you. About this balance between skills, speaking, listening, reading, there is approach that it's better to dive into this pool with sharks and like start speaking instantly. But I'll be honest, I didn't learn with your method simply because I already spoke English by that time, so I didn't need to learn anymore.
Yes,
but
yes.
I read about it on Wikipedia. In Russian Wikipedia, they say that your method suggests that you don't even try to speak for several months. So you concentrate on listening, on reading a lot of text, but you don't try to speak. What do you think about that? Has it changed somehow, or you?
I just feel you should speak when you feel like speaking. And so I don't think you should feel obliged to speak early. You can speak whenever you feel ready to speak. And it'll depend on where you are. When I was in Japan, I could speak from day one because I could go into a store and try to use whatever little Japanese I had. But if I'm learning a language here in Canada, or if I'm in Russia learning a language and I don't have people to speak to, then I would wait until I get an online tutor. Because, I think everything we do in language learning should be meaningful. So if you're going to speak with someone, that should be a meaningful conversation. If you don't have vocabulary, if you don't understand very well, you can't have a meaningful conversation. So typically, I will wait until I have, the way we count them at Link, 3,000, 5,000 words in the language, that I at least understand something. I might have some words. Then I start speaking online. And anytime we start speaking, it's difficult. When you sort of transition from input activities to output activities, it's going to be difficult. And it'll gradually get better. And eventually, to speak well, you have to speak a lot. But the more vocabulary you have, even passive vocabulary, the better your comprehension, the less painful it's going to be to start speaking. So I'm never in any hurry. And I think it's wrong when teachers try to insist on sort of correct output early, because it's going to take a while for the brain to get used to the rules of the new language. So I'm very casual. Whenever you feel like speaking, speak. Don't worry about how you do. enjoy the process.
I think your method will be great for a lot of people who feel shy to actually start speaking. So it's great because more and more I see people who try to encourage people step out of your comfort zone, start no matter how much you understand, no matter what. So it's great that you encourage people to be comfortable, follow their own pace until they are ready fully for this process.
I mean, we can't really overstate the importance of comprehension. And comprehension is not just a matter of having the words, it's also a matter of being used to different scenarios in the language. I remember I was in St. Petersburg and I went to buy a train ticket to go to Viborg. And I know all the words related to buying the ticket. But so I wait in line. So after about 5 minutes, there I am in front of this lady. And she's not very patient. And she says, blah, 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 blah. I didn't know what she was saying because I had never been in that situation before. So you have to be exposed to that situation. Now, the next time I do that, then I can anticipate what she's going to say and I'll be able to operate. So the better your comprehension and the more different scenarios you've been exposed to, the better you're going to do. But the most uncomfortable feeling is when you don't understand what the other person is saying.
Yes, it's so discouraging. And even if you can ask some question, what's the point asking it if you wouldn't understand the answer anyway?
Exactly.
Yeah. So what about this link? You created this platform, this method.
Right.
So if some of my students would like to learn it, how would you would like to use it for learning Russian? How would you describe it so they understand what's going on there?
Well, I'm a great believer in the importance of input, well-organized input activities, listening and reading. And what Link does is it provides a vast sort of library of content, first of all, and then the opportunity to bring in content from anywhere, YouTube, ebooks, audiobooks, you name it, and you use these, this sort of almost unlimited library of content to learn. And when you're listening, of course you listen. You don't understand, you read, you save words and phrases to a database. Of course you look up the meaning, and there's a variety of dictionaries depending on your native language. You can connect to the dictionary that you prefer, and so you look up words. You can review the content, even if it's an audio. If it's a long book, you can go sentence by sentence. And so it's just a means of accessing the wide array of content that's available now on the internet. It didn't used to be the case. It used to be that I had to fly to Riga, Latvia to buy Russian audiobooks because we don't have them here. But now you don't have to do that. You can just go online and you can subscribe to, I don't know, Litres or one of these services, and you can download anything you need. But all of the material that's available on the internet can be used, and all of the functionality at Link that helps you learn from content is available, whether it's something in our library or something that you import. So it's just a platform, a learning environment. We track your progress, we track the words you know, we track the words you've learned. All of this is kind of motivating because so often we feel we're not really progressing in the language. And yet when we see on our page that there's fewer and fewer unknown words, we understand more. So those are it's basically an environment that some people find congenial and pleasant for language learning. And pleasant is important in language learning because if you enjoy the process, you'll stay with it and you'll just keep going. And if you keep going, you're going to succeed. There's no question. If you put in the time and you stay with it, you will improve. You won't get worse because you have to trust the brain. The brain learns. You just have to keep at it with a positive attitude.
Yes, this is great. You mentioned that pleasure is the key for progress. This is so important. I will leave the links under the video and in the comments for your platform and for your YouTube channel as well. So I don't want to take too much of your time. I know you're a very busy man.
Sure, happy to talk to you. I should say, by the way, that the discovery of Russian was a phenomenal sort of phase of my life. At the age of 60, because I had learned Japanese and Chinese, and I very much tended to sort of de-emphasize grammar. So grammar is, every so often you look at it, but you don't worry about it. It's not the focus of language learning. And then people would say to me, well, that might work for Japanese and Chinese, but it won't work for Russian because Russian is, all these Slavic languages have all these complicated issues of grammar. And so that essentially was the reason why I decided to learn Russian, other than the fact that I had read Russian novels in translation when I was young. And but it was a lovely, and so then I started watching movies. I remember the first movie I watched was Žestoký romance, which is in the 19th century in
it's
Russia.
It's my favorite.
Yeah.
It's my favorite.
Yeah,
Russian
I mean,
movie.
I was like, it was so exotic, so phenomenal. And that whole Russian world, it has a tremendous appeal. And as you continue to explore it, you can be in the 19th century. You can watch Собачье сердце, for example, which is 20th century. There's so much stuff there. And I spent a lot of time on Russian. I would say 2-3 years. Every morning before going to work, I would grab, either I was listening to, Turgenev or Kuprin or whatever audiobook I was listening to in Russian, subsequently reading it on link, or I would grab 3 or 4 interviews from Echo Moskvy, what's his name, Svanidze, or all these different people. And I would listen and then come home and read it. 2-3 years, full-time, like an hour and a half a day. And it was lovely. And then it opens up other Slavic languages. So once you have Russian, you can do Czech, you can do Ukrainian, and all these countries have their own history, have their own traditions. And so these places that were like just something on a map come alive. And so I very much recommend, and mind you, I feel the same way about Arabic and Persian as I discover, different parts of the world. But in particular, my experience with Russian, it was phenomenal. And I very much sort of encourage people and congratulate them for deciding to learn Russian. It's a wonderful language to learn, and there's lots there to discover.
Yes, and being in love with culture, with history, with literature, this definitely helps, at least to keep your motivation. Today, all those movies, this Жестокий romance, I was horrified. We found it in English dubbing. So all the voiceover, you don't hear Russian voices, but the English voices. And a lot of people yeah.
Yeah, I would recommend that because it's such an attractive movie to watch, if you can get it with English subtitles. Nowadays, we all are used to watching Netflix. We're used to watching the original version with subtitles in our language. And I think that is more of an enticement to work on our Russian. So I would recommend they watch Žestoký romance, Ironií судьбы, or any of those old Soviet movies that are really excellent. But watch them with English subtitles until you're good enough to watch them without subtitles.
Yes, I agree.
Reading the Russian subtitles is a real challenge because it just goes too quickly. If it's not your own language, it's very hard to read subtitles in another language.
It is. Since we've been speaking English for way too long, let's do something encouraging. So to finish this interview with some positive, optimistic, enthusiastic note, let's wish our students something in Russian.
Окей, я не очень хорошо говорю по-русски, я говорю с ошибками, но для меня русский язык это стал один из фантастический период моей жизни. Это был открыто новый мир. И сейчас я не часто говорю по-русски, для этого я думаю, что уровень моего русского стал хуже. Но если я опять начинаю говорить по-русски, я думаю, что я могу улучшить мой уровень по-русски. Но, к сожалению, сейчас мне немножко трудно говорить по-русски сегодня.
Вы отлично говорите. You speak. What are you talking about? It's great. You speak fast, no mistakes. It's great. It's amazing.
Yeah. I feel a little bit because I have been away from Russian for so long. I always feel, and that's another point. We should never actually regret. We should never worry about how we do. So I shouldn't say that. I should just speak, and I speak the way I speak. And if I speak better sometimes and worse some other times, so be it.
Yeah, you speak wonderfully. Спасибо большое. Большое спасибо.
Спасибо вам.
I'm sure
Спасибо
it
вам.
will be a wonderful, encouraging interview for my students. And yeah, thank you. Спасибо.
Thank you.